Hi, this is Kim. We're back today with Martin. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna mess it up. It's Schondorfer. Um, do I pass? Did I pass on that?
Yes, very
Okay.
good.
Okay, great. So Martin Schondorfer, and he is gonna, he's from risingtofreedom.com is his website. And he's currently in Berlin, but he grew up in Austria, which I find fascinating. Um, which means you're like halfway around the world right now.
I am.
And Martin, what do you do?
All right. First of all, thank you, Kim, for having me here as a guest. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
You are more than welcome.
Yes, thank you. I'm half around the world in Berlin, where I'm a holistic life coach, and for me, that's really about supporting people and connection. I feel like connection is the very good word to use for the kind of work that I do.
This is a dumb question. What do you connect them with?
Themselves.
Not other people, not necessarily other people, but themselves.
It's a very cheesy answer, I know.
It's not cheesy.
But but
Do you know how many people in the world are not connected to themselves? That they have no idea what they're feeling, they have no idea what they're thinking, and they have no idea why. I mean, obviously you do because you're in this job.
I totally agree. And that's why it's cheesy, but it's at the same time the word that I'd be using, because it's really that we don't just see it with individuals, but we see it on a global level, the disconnection. And it's really, if we disconnect it from ourselves, how can we connect to other people? It's just not impossible. And I have a background in acting and sports and music. And with all three different, what do you call it?
Modalities, medium.
Yes, it's called modalities. Yeah, I like that word. It's all about being able to tune into the whole, like with the connection with other people. But if you're yourself lost in thoughts and worries, doubt, and in sports, if you're nervous, you're not going to catch the ball. Like you're going to mess up. You're going to have an impact on everybody around you. And it's the same thing in life. I feel if you don't catch the ball of life for yourself, how are you able to positively have an impact on people around you? Most likely you won't, because you're always depending on other people making up for what you're not able to do yourself. So for me, it's like connecting people back to who they are and have that as the starting point to a change in their environment, but then also on a global scale.
Oh, I really like that idea that like when you shift yourself, you're actually helping the world. Right. Once you come into your full, authentic, vulnerable, beautiful self, you help the world.
Yeah. It's there's like this concept in society, and I learned that through one of the seminars I attended. It's have, do, and be. Basically, like you have to have a degree, you have to have good grades, then you can do something for fun in order to feel a specific emotion. But I'm like, that way you're always depending on the outside. You're always depending on an outside influence or something to happen for you to feel something. And I'm like, how about we shift it around? I adapted that kind of mindset where it's like, how about you start with your own being first, with your own thoughts, with your own emotions, and then let that have an inspired impact on how and what you do. And then you just watch the results happening in alignment with your internal emotions and internal world. So yeah, all about authenticity, being authentically who you are.
Well, what happens when you don't realize you're not being the authentic you? What do you
Personal
think?
question for me personally,
No, just
or
in general, like for the, so I'm going to use an example. So like when I was super little, in like middle school and high school, I thought I was being me, right? Turns out I wasn't actually being me, but I was being the trauma that was me. I was being the garbage that was inside of me because of all of the nonsense that came in because of family decisions and family life, right? And I thought I was being my authentic self, but I actually wasn't. I was being somebody who was a survivor of trauma and getting through. And I didn't actually heal until my like 30s, 30s, 30s. So like, what do you do when you don't realize you're not being your authentic self, but you think you're being your authentic self?
I always say the first step is awareness,
Mm.
conscious awareness, because we are aware of so many things at once. I mean, especially in today's world with very short attention span, and compared to all the noise from the outside, social media, the news, like there's so many things that are happening all at once, and we're taking that in. Or so we think, like we're taking it in and it's not going to affect us that much. But it's kind of like also the brain waves in a way where if we are in a specific on a specific wave right now, then we're more receptive. That's how commercials work. Background in acting, you know, that's how commercials work. When you're relaxed and you're watching a TV show or something, and then suddenly all those colors come up and the music and everything, it affects you. You let it into your subconscious, where the emotional center is also, and you're going to have an emotional reaction to it. Once you have an emotional reaction, that's where the emotional buying is coming from, where you have an emotion, you're like, I want to buy that.
Yeah.
And
I watched Oreo do that to me last week, actually. I was like, I don't
yeah.
have a TV, so I don't really watch TV very often. And I bumped into an Oreo ad that was like all about like people being together, like drawn together. And they were like, it was like this really fun, inspiring, and it made me feel connected in a way that I don't always feel connected. And so I was like, I really want an Oreo. And then I was like, no, I really like, I don't eat Oreo. Like I don't eat gluten. I don't eat sugar. I don't eat, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't eat, right? And dairy. I'm like, all the things I don't eat are currently in an Oreo. I was like, I don't really like Oreos and I don't really want one. But that commercial like totally played on all of the emotional stuff that if I wasn't aware, I would be in my kitchen.
It is so powerful.
Yeah.
And things that we can, if we become more aware of ourselves and what triggers us, how we react and respond to certain things, we can also utilize that to our advantage. And I'm not saying like for manipulation, because I'm not about manipulating people, but we can start changing ourselves, because at that point it's important to, and like the first, what I mentioned before with creating awareness, the conscious awareness is so much different than the awareness, because awareness is just pretty much everything all the time. But once we are consciously aware with our intellectual mind, what is happening, where we can start reflecting, where we can start interpreting on a completely different level, that's when we can start looking at what is actually happening. And then also compare, like, what is happening compared to how would I like it to happen. And when it comes to like connection or disconnection from ourselves, we might be aware what's happening, but it's lacking the conscious awareness of what is really going on. And also we might not have a comparison of who do I want to be, how do I want to be. And if we don't really have that, it's very difficult to know if you're authentically you or not. But you can, I would say it's like, listen to your emotions, listen to your internal guidance, because when you really tune into yourself, you know, because we cannot lie to ourselves if we really are open, or if we really listen and we're open to hear. But very often what happens is we pretend we are listening, but we're actually rejecting and pushing things down. And then we cannot be authentic in that sense, or connected to ourselves, if we are in the first step is already disconnected.
Right. So when you have somebody who's brand new who comes in to see you and says, Mr. Schondorfer, would you be a Mr. at this point? You're not a doctor. You're just are you a Mr.?
I'm a Mr., but I always use my first name when
when I'm
in the
when you work, you're always Martin. Nobody calls you Mr. Martin or Hair Martin. Anybody call you Hair Martin?
It's always Martin. No Mr., no hair. No.
Okay. So they come in and they're like, Martin, here, I'll just be authentically vulnerable with you, right? Like I had the second person in a quite short period of time recently tell me, I'm not going to date you, meaning me, because there's like an ex in my past who I have decided to go back to. So this is like me being totally vulnerable, because this just happened yesterday, right? Like it's what, November 16th as we're recording this. So this just happened to me yesterday too. So that makes two people in a very short period of time who are like, so now I'm thinking in my little brain, I'm like, hey, what about me is making other people go back to their exes, right? And so I'm having some disconnect with myself. Like this is what I'm bringing to the table today. If I were coming to you as a person to be like, hey, Martin, this is my disconnect, this is where I am. And I could have two different mindsets, and you can deal with either one, or you can deal with both. One is it's all on them, or I could be like, it's all on me, right? How would you deal with somebody how would you guide, direct, support, somebody who is not willing to take ownership for any of their own stuff in that scenario?
Well, first of all, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing this.
Yeah.
Good question. If it's someone that I have not worked with before, where rapport is not yet developed not yet developed well enough in that sense, where I can be really direct and they understand where I'm coming from in that sense, I would go a little bit differently compared to what I'm going to say about in this situation, where it's really, if I already have a rapport with someone and I feel like this is appropriate, I would really show them the perspective that if there's two people, there's always two sides. And there's always the question, okay, why do you remind them of their ex? But at the same time, why do I attract the people who then look at me and are reminded of their ex?
Right. Or they decide to go back to their ex, right? They just go back to their ex. They're like, I'm not going to be with you anymore. I'm going to go back to my ex.
And it's really that because one thing you cannot, you don't have power over them. You don't have power over what they think, what they feel, how they react, how they see you. Like, we don't have any power over that. No. The only power we have over is, well, and not always, of course, that's not always the case.
I think I know what you're going to say. Yeah. Yes, you do, but you don't, but you do.
It really, I mean, there are situations, I mean, I have so many tools that I work with, and everything that I share within my coaching and with people around me, it's things that I've also implemented in my own life. It's not anything I'm like, oh, I read that in the book, I've never done it, but here you have the answer. Where I'm like, no, I want to have experienced it, where I'm like, well, I know the power behind it if you resonate with it, but I don't know if you're going to resonate with it. So let's see what works for you. And that also brings me back to your question, where it's, when someone comes in with this question or this situation, then first of all, it's really important for me to start understanding the person. And not necessarily for me, because I don't really need to understand them, because it's not my life, it's theirs. But it's more that they can start discovering, who am I? What are the things that are going on? And I have a few tools that I'm using, because for me, it's always about a holistic approach. I don't only look in one area and just that area alone, but I always look into other areas as well, because so many times we think it's the cause kind of is in that specific area of life, but it might like somewhere completely else. And when we look at life and ourselves in a more holistic way, then we can discover parts of ourselves that we might have not discovered before. And when it comes to that point, I always go with vision, with what do you want to experience in life? Who do you want to attract in your life? What is it like emotionally that you want to feel in your life? Because I'm a little bit different than most people out there in that sense. If situations happen, I listen to it, but then I'm like, okay, how about we leave that for now and we look into the future of how you want to create it. And I'm not doing that based on like, let's ignore what happens, but let's just not focus on it right now. We can analyze it in the process for sure, because it's also important, like reflections, what happened, how did I show up, what did I like, what didn't I like. But first, I always prefer going into the vision of how do you want to be, because then you can figure out where you want to be. Like if you want to be here, but you're here, then you know, okay, this is like, there needs to be a shift for me to be on that level.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, what I realize is like when we focus so much on the past and talk about the experiences and all the things we didn't want and all the things that happened, then the emotions that start being built in our subconscious, they're going to get bigger and bigger. And very often it's like, oh, I'm not going to date anymore. Like, I'm not going to date those kind of men anymore. Or even worse, it's like we put it in ourselves and like, well, people don't like me. I'm not worth it. I will never find anyone who appreciates me for who I am. And then again, we have that have, do, and be. We put it on the outside. We make the outside responsible for how we feel. Shift it around and say, okay, you know what? The outside, they don't have the power over me, because I can choose to take the power back to me, and then start developing my inner strength and focus on me being happy with myself without needing anyone.
Right.
Of course, we're social beings, so it is important that it's all about connection. So there's never like one side go this path and that's the answer of it all. There's always so many levels, many facets to look at. That's why I work holistically, because otherwise I'm like, oh, just go and be by yourself and be happy by yourself. And then someone will come along. I'm like, who am I to know that? I don't have like this glass thingy here where I look into it and then I know the future. That's not me. I don't do that, you know? So what I know is that if you work on yourself, if you put yourself first out of self-love, then you will be able to detach yourself from what happens on the outside, and you can start creating your own destiny and your own dream life. And then you will attract, and that's kind of like based on law of attraction, or if you're not in that spiritual belief, I mean, it's also science, action, reaction. So what you put out there, it comes back. Right. And if you put out there love and appreciation and gratitude and positive energy, then it will come back. You will attract those people back into your life because they're like, you're awesome. I want to be around you. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, and just to clarify what I thought, you were like, you can't control, right? But I know that you there are things your first response, your first reaction, I should say, your first reaction, you may not be able to control. It's just like it comes in. It's like an automatic response zone, right? And I'm definitely one to ride out the automatic response. I just ride it out. Like I very often, most of the time, I can't say all the time, but I would say very often now, when I have the automatic response, the automatic, like my gut reaction on how I feel about something, I let that come in and go out, and I like process it as it's happening. I'm like, yeah, look at all of me being angry. Like, look at me being like snarky and all of the negative things I got to say right now. And then I'm like, and then in the case of yesterday, I was like, oh, that's really, my immediate reaction was like, oh, that's really interesting. That solves a whole bunch of problems. I was like, that's actually kind of a relief. In a good way. Like there were questions I had that I didn't know how the things would work out. And I'm like, now I don't have to worry about how those things will work out. I will just, it's not even a problem anymore because it got removed from me. And then I get to response, which is how do I want to respond to this so that that person is supported? How do I want to respond to this so that it's kind and it's loving and it's again putting out the energy I actually want to be putting out, right? I think one of the things that I struggle with the law of attraction, don't believe me, I don't struggle with the law of attraction. The law of attraction and I are friends. Like we hang out and I'm a big manifester. So like the law of attraction and I hang out. But I think one of the problems I have personally with the law of attraction is I need to get to a space where I'm okay. And I don't want to push the negative away while I'm in the negative. because one, that makes the negative grow. And two, it exists. We are here on earth having a human experience. Like, I can't deny my humanity. So if somebody does something that I have a big reaction to, or something happens that I have a big reaction to, I get in a car accident, I fall and I, hurt myself. Like, these things are going to have a negative, like, they're going to have negative feelings that come up. And with law of attraction, it basically says, don't have any negative feelings. And I'm like, that's not true. They exist.
Absolutely. I totally get what you're saying. And I also, that's the major thing I also struggle with when it comes to law of attraction, or the mainstream law of attraction mindset in that sense. It's like, oh, always focus on the positive, don't focus on the negative, just, always make sure you're on that high flying disc or whatever. And I'm like,
you've been hanging out with Esther Hicks. Yes, get on your high flying disc. Get on your high flying disc. However, I have to say, I have to like move back onto the high flying disc. When I fall off my high flying disc, it might take me a day or two to get back on it, right? Like, it may take me an hour to get back on it. I will get back on it. Believe me, I will get back on it. I just have to process some shit first.
and that, I think the important thing in that is you want to go back on that disc, because
I do. I love how it feels.
It's so much fun to have fun and like to really enjoy life. But I totally agree when it comes to emotions, and especially when it's negative emotions, we need to give ourselves time to process, because just because us focusing on or not, let's say it this way, there's always positive, negative going on all the time. Like, if I focus long enough, I can have a breakdown. But if I focus long enough,
I could give myself a panic attack right now if you wanted me to.
Exactly. It's like and I mean, I'm coming from the background as an actor again. In acting, the way I was trained in method acting is like, you become that character and you feel those emotions, and those emotions are real.
Yes.
So, and they're real, not based on because I'm going through that situation right now, but I'm creating within my mind a story, thoughts that trigger emotions. And that way I feel it in that very moment, even though it's not happening.
Yes.
So most of the time when people feel miserable or feel stuck, don't feel like doing anything, or don't know where to go next, what to do with their lives, what I've come to realize within the work I'm doing, but also with myself, is that we create stories in our mind all day long, and even at night, subconsciously we continue. But it's really, most of the time we feel miserable based on things that don't happen right now. They're based on things that happened some time ago, even if it's a few hours ago, but it's in the past. Or we focus and have that story, that movie in our head about the future, which is not here yet. So based on here right now, there might be a couple of things that we need to change. Like, if my throat itches, I might need some water, or if I feel like I need to cough, I can try to suppress it. I've tried it so many times, but it's easier to let it out and be done with it.
Exactly.
The more I try to suppress it, the worse usually it gets. Or a sneeze, I start crying when I'm trying to hold back a sneeze, but if I let it out, it's over.
Right.
I acknowledged it. And that's the thing where I also connected with the awareness and the conscious awareness. It's really important to acknowledge how you feel without the blame, without the guilt, without the shame of feeling a negative emotion. Like you said, we are all human beings. We are all in there together. We all feel like S word here.
Yeah, you all feel like shit at times. Yes, you can say it.
Oh, okay. I don't know if
no, I drop F-bombs.
So yeah, sometimes you feel like shit, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes you feel amazing. It's all part of life. And that's what I also call the purpose of life. When people, I had a conversation a few years ago, and it was about purpose of life, and I always connected with something like an achievement or an award or a reward. And I talked to this guy, and I was like, getting into the conversation. And then he kind of said something. I was like, wait, what? It took me a while to find it within me to say, yes, he's actually absolutely right. And he said, there's a huge difference between mission and purpose. And I confuse mission with purpose, where it's like, I feel like it's my mission to put myself out there, to inspire people, to get globally global awareness, basically, through my coaching. But my purpose is, yes, it's part of, like, my mission is part of my purpose, but my purpose is to live life to the fullest, to have a life with the ups and downs, everything in between, but to experience life, everything that life has to gift us.
Yes.
I want to experience that. And I feel like that is the purpose of life. It's not connected with a specific path, with a specific person or vocation. So, and once I changed that, I was like, oh, I can experience the pain. And it's fun because I can look at it and I can learn from it. I can grow through it. And at that point, I was like, when something negative happens, I'm like, that sucks. But hey, it's life, or I am alive. And I truly appreciate that.
Yeah. So I want to hop in on this a little bit. And if you need to cut me off, I'm fine. I don't know if you're aware, but in yoga and in life practices, when you're really upset and you can't handle it, and like, let's say you're in a professional setting or you're at school and you're like, doing life, and you shove your emotions down, right? You're like, I can't have this feeling, so I'm just going to tamp it down. I'm going to tamp it down. I'm going to tamp it down, make it like it's not here, right? Where you're actually shoving it is your hips and your pelvic bowl. And so the more you do that, the less like flexible you are, right? So I am terrible. I am so not flexible. Like I can't, and like I was talking to somebody about it yesterday, and she's like, yeah, you can't really do like the split things because like there's all this emotion that's holding you entangled in there. Well, I had this yoga class about 3 weeks ago that like kicked my ass, and yoga kicks my ass. Like I've told people when they're like, come to yoga with me, I'm like, do you know I weep? Like I weep at yoga. Like it's a thing I do. Just so you know, I weep in yoga. So like they're like, no, come. I want to see this happen. I want to experience it. So I got myself into a yoga class about 3 weeks ago that was really intense. And I knew in the middle of class, I was in trouble. She had us do like a wide-legged, you put your legs out as wide as your mat, right? So you're sideways on your mat, your legs are as wide as possible. And you normally do a forward fold there, right? And I can handle a forward fold there. This time she was like, I want you to crawl out from your forward fold and put yourself in a plank while you're in this wide-legged position. And I like wound up in a child's pose, talking to myself, going, you're fine, you're on a mat, you're fine, everything's fine. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be that class, isn't it? I'm like, this is the class, I'm going to lose it. And so then she has us go into another pose called pigeon, which is a total hip opener, where you like curl your leg up in front of you and then you bend down over on top of it with your other leg back behind you. If you need to go take a look at what this is, it's a mess. And so I was like bent over my leg, like huddled over my leg, and all of a sudden, like I was bawling, so much so the instructor brought me 3 tissues. She's like, here you go, I'll just put them here next to your mat for you. Because I was like lost it. At the end of class, on both legs, the other leg, we went to the other leg, weeping all over my mat. End of class, this guy comes up to me and goes, was it the song? I was like, no. The song was touching. I think it was like a female version of Jeff Buckley's A Hallelujah. There was another song before it too that was like really heartstringy kind of song. But like, no, I was like, no, it's not really the song. It's the fact that like my body decided to release. Like my body decided that all of the stuff I've been pushing down for so long just needed to come up and out. And that's how it did it. And there if you process it in the moment, it doesn't get tamped down into your hips, right? Where you were like with the sneeze or the cough. If you just like let it happen as it's happening and you like cope with it there's no shoving and there's no like storing and hoarding of emotion in your hips. But if you're not processing it in that moment, such as I didn't for years when I was little, it comes out at weird times. And especially when you're like opening your hips and breathing into your hips, it's totally normal to lose it, as I would say, lose your shit, right? To bawl your eyes out in yoga. Like it happens if you're going to breathe into your hips. It's actually really healing.
I love the body mind connection and how everything is just connected. And that's why I always say, like, in a also a holistic sense, there's not one way to go about it and find a solution, but there's so many different approaches, and using your body is one, like, a hugely or insanely effective way to release. And it's yeah, I love
Yeah.
yoga as well. So it's
Yeah, I love yoga. I
it's
actually
kind of
don't.
like,
There are days where I'm like, I don't want to go. I don't want to do it. But then after I do it, I'm like, I'm so glad I went.
yeah, that's the after effects, I feel like, is always what I'm envisioning. Like, okay, I know how I'm gonna feel afterwards. So I always, when I don't feel like doing something, it not just if it's anything that's connected to sports or movement, but also when I, for work, for example, when I feel like some kind of resistance, most of the time I don't look at, okay, what's causing the resistance and what's going on within me. I just close my eyes. I'm aware, I'm acknowledging it. I say, okay, it's here. I don't judge it. It's part of my experience right now. But then I go into the future and say, how do I want to feel? How do I want to come out of this next appointment? Or how do I want to feel when I do lead generation or something where I'm like, it's not my favorite part of the work. I love talking to people. I love that connection. Everything else, I'm like, it's okay. So I always go into, like, how do I want to feel? And how do I feel once through that process, I can get that connection?
Yes.
And that is most of the time because in our subconscious, when we create that movie, it's going to react emotionally. So I'm going to feel that before it actually happens, but in the positive way. And it's not by taking away from the negative or from any other emotion, but it's first I go through it, I accept it. And most of the time, so many times, of course, not if it's connected to like a trauma or something that's been happening for a very long time, but like those in between negative experiences that happen pretty much every day, most of the time, once we get into that mode of acceptance, say, okay, this is part of the experience. Usually then it goes. It's the
Yes.
same with thoughts. I don't know if you know the book, The Power of Now. I just love it, by Eckhart Tolle. And there was an exercise in there where you, like, also close your eyes and then you look at the thoughts, and kind of like the thoughts, I pictured them as clouds,
Mm-hmm.
looking at the clouds and just keep watching them, like try to catch them in a sense and seeing them move. And every time I accepted the thought, I'm like, okay, you're here. Let's take a
Mm-hmm.
closer look. They were gone. I'm
There we
like,
go.
what did
Right.
I
It's sort of
forgot
like
what.
another practice I've done where there's a river and you imagine the thought on a leaf. And then
Mhm.
sometimes that leaf gets stuck in an eddy on the side of the bank of the river and doesn't move, and it just stays there for a while. And I find it fascinating that my brain does that. That my brain takes a thought that doesn't want to leave and knows that to stick it doesn't stay in the middle of the river, right? Those thoughts go right down. It's the thoughts that don't want to leave that like come over to the side and stick on the side. And then as
Mm,
I'm like watching the other leaves, I go back to find the one that was stuck on the side, and that one's gone too.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's powerful when we can look at, like, how we function as human beings. If we look at nature, for example, it's so powerful how we can see kind of the reflection of who we are, or part of who we are, and how we work as well.
Yeah. That whole getting grounded thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, if we're not grounded, it's very difficult to go anywhere. We cannot fly if we're not grounded. So,
It's true.
to one of the things you mentioned before, like with the suppressing, it's I always look at it like those pots that you use for cooking, where you close the lid, but on the top you have that high pressure thingy,
I feel like
where
a pressure cooker.
pressure cooker. Oh, thank you. Finally, I have the word. I knew the German word, but in English I've never used it, and nobody ever told. Thank you. Pressure cooker.
It's a pressure cooker.
Thank you.
The second you said pot, I actually had a pressure cooker come in my head. So
Because that's exactly how emotions or pushing down emotions work. You
mhm.
put something in there, and then you put a little bit more in there, you close it, you turn on the heat, and then you just leave, and you're like, oh, it's gonna
It's gonna
be
go
gone.
away.
Yeah. No, it usually it goes with a bang, but then you have to clean up the mess. And
Exactly.
it's the same with
Especially if you don't
emotion.
put the lid on right, right?
Yeah. And it's all like everything works together in a positive or in a negative way. So it's exactly the same thing with our emotions. If we push them down, pretend they're not there anymore, then it will become way too much at one point. That suppression is it needs to, I like to, when it comes to depression, because depression, not the clinical depression, but the depression that like way too many people use the word of they're depressed, while it's not like a clinical depression or something where it actually has like in your brain something going on that causes it. But there's so many people who are like, oh, I'm depressed, I don't feel good. I'm like, okay, let's take a look at what you do with your emotions.
Right.
And I love that, like taking the word apart and like pressure or depression, because it's pressure that you're actually most of the time is the root, because you're pressing it down, you're suppressing it. And then when you suppress long enough, the body needs to depress, like it needs to let go of the pressure, and it either explodes or it implodes. So we either show the emotions to the outside, or we totally resignate and say like, I don't want to be around anyone, I'm just going to be by myself, and I don't care, I don't give a flying,
Fuck.
not I'm going to say that word now, but
You could say that word.
yeah, it's
Um,
fine.
uh,
Yeah.
or it comes out in another way, like people get irritable bowel syndrome, right? IBS, or they get some other kind of bodily function because they're not moving things the way that they need to emotionally, and it causes, like, if people who aren't talking wind up getting throat, like, it just amazes me the amount of people who like come up with diagnoses because their manifestation of not expressing themselves the way they need to, like somebody who doesn't talk or doesn't share their feelings getting like throat cancer, or coming up with like a thyroid issue because they're not sharing who they really are in an authentic way verbally, or somebody who's like, shoving all their emotions down and then they get like IBS, right? Because there's nowhere else for that pressure to go but there.
Yeah. It's like your body most of the time tells you what's going on within you. So
Yeah, including emotions. It tells you what's going on.
yeah, and it all comes back to awareness, to see
and
and to look
connection.
into. Yeah, it's all connected. And that's why especially when I start working with someone, I really look at how aware are they of themselves, of what's going on in their lives. And before we talk about any specific topics, I'm like, okay, let's talk about like the whole cycle of being, from your thoughts, how you let the outside influence you, to how that's going to affect your subconscious programming, your emotions, your vibration in your body, the actions you take, the results you get, all that kind of parts in that whole equation. I go more general about it in the beginning. So also answering kind of your question from earlier,
Yes.
going into like really into starting to understand how life and human beings work, and then put on top of that specific situation, say like, okay, if that is the situation, what is the outside circumstance that's happening? What is being created on the inside? What programs do you have that are subconsciously, through education, through the way you were raised? What's going on? What's active there right now? What's also programs that you created yourself over the past few years, belief systems that you've created? How does that affect you emotionally? How do those emotions affect your body? How does your emotions and how your body feels affect how and what you do? And how is that going to show with your results? So then you can use the whole cycle or circle of how everything is connected, and you can look at, okay, what am I doing in those, or what's my part in that equation, and where can I start changing and shifting things? But without the understanding and the lack of openness to start becoming aware, I don't work with those people. If you're not aware, if you're not open to change something, or especially not changing yourself, if you don't want to look at what is my part in the whole equation of life or of my life, then I wouldn't work with those people. Not immediately. I would create conversations and see, okay, what is going on with them. But I don't want to work with anyone who is not ready to take a closer look at themselves.
Right.
That's my prerequisite. If you don't want, if you don't, well, I think lots of people want change, but they don't want to change themselves.
Right. And there are a
Like,
lot of people who don't want change either. There are a lot of people
yeah,
who are just like, it is what it is. And they say that it is what it is. And they don't want to like go in with the grapefruit spoon to dig around and find out, well, is it really what it is? Or is it what I believe it is? Or is it what this person is telling me it is?
the thing is, I do believe that those people want change, but the process of how to get there is most of the time way too painful.
And the other thing I will also say, yes, way too painful. I agree. The other thing I will also say is the subconscious mind's job. The job of the subconscious for all of us is to keep us safe. That is the job of the subconscious, is to keep you safe. Now, whether or not that's like it's doing its job, because there are times it does things that actually makes you more in danger because it thinks it's keeping you safe because of old trauma and all the other stuff, right? But its job is to keep you safe. And so if it feels that it's going to be dangerous to be in pain and to do the work and to change, the subconscious mind is going to shut down. No, we're not going there because, and until you're able to locate, oh, this is resistance. I'm feeling resistance. And you don't have to say what the resistance is. Just be like, I'm having resistance, and just acknowledge resistance and go in the other direction. Yes, I have resistance, or I'm going to like figure out how to climb over, go through around the resistance, which is really your subconscious going, this is scary and not safe.
It's also with the fight, flight, freeze reaction. It's what you just said. I can so totally catch myself every time I start crossing a street and a car is coming, and like I see it, but then I freeze and I'm like, that is the most stupid thing to do, because I'm standing there not moving. I'm like, the easiest or the most effective thing to do is take a step back and chill,
Yeah.
If you step back where you came from, it's safe, there's no car there. And but most of the time I'm like just in a position where I'm like, that's not helpful, like, because the driver is not, he doesn't or she doesn't know where I'm going. It's like,
right.
It's very risky. Back in the day, of course it made sense. If there was a huge bear, you just pretended to be a tree, then it might keep walking. But cars and bears are two different things, and
they don't work
that
the same way.
action is not, it doesn't serve me in that moment. In other moments, of course, if I just stand back somewhere and pretend not to exist, might help me sometimes. But it's really that immediate response. I do believe that we can change it. I do believe that we can change so much about how we react, how we respond, and that we can reprogram our subconscious to serve us with the positive, and to let go step by step by those programs that don't serve us, where we realize, hey, this is how I reacted, but this is not serving me and not anyone around me. So how can I change that? And that's again into creating first awareness, but then going into self-image and into how do you want to be, who do you want to be, how do you want to react and respond. So it's all about like juggling, how do you see yourself right now compared to who you want to be, and then make adjustments step by step. It's that 1%, like 1% change can go a long way. If you change, like if I go from Berlin to the US and I change 1% of the direction, I'm not going to meet you. I'm going to be somewhere completely different. So same in life.
That's actually something my marketing team, I'll be talking about this on a podcast soon. My marketing team sat me down and they're like, we're not going in the right direction. We're about 3 to 5 degrees off. And I'm like, if I'm trying to get to England, I'm actually going to wind up in Italy if I'm 3 to 5 degrees off. So like it makes a huge difference if you're not going in the right direction.
Absolutely. Again, awareness. If you're not aware that you are doing that,
exactly,
or that you're capable of doing it, then you will just end up there and be like, how did I get here? And that's unfortunately the way most people live. They go, they're not looking around, they're not really reflecting, and then they're like, how the hell did I get here? I don't want to be here. And then they continue not looking at where they want to go. It's just like, not here, let's take the next best thing. I see that often with jobs. Oh, I don't want to work here, let's just take the next job because I need money. I'm like, well, if you do that, if you just go from one job to the next, then it's very, very difficult to find fulfillment in your career. But if you first look at, where do you want to go? How do you want to experience? Like when I work with people on specific careers, I never go into, even if they know what they want to, where they want to work, I'm like, let's not focus on that specific, like what, or those specifics. Let's focus on how you want to feel. What kind of people do you want to be around every day for 8+ hours, in most cases? It's like, how do you want to experience that experience?
Yeah.
And then go into, okay, let's put that on top and see if that still fits. And if it does, great, then you can move forward, but also with greater awareness of who you are and who you want to have in your environment.
Yeah. There's a guy named Chris Duncan who does work with the superconscious, which is amazing. He's fascinating. His work is fascinating. He says that to be fired is a gift. He's like, because then, I mean, you could get fired, right? And then you could be like, two options: just go immediately and find the next thing that's just going to fill the paycheck and do the thing. Or it's an opportunity to go, where am I? What do I want to do? Am I on the road I want to be on? Is this the road I want? Do I want to just hop into the next job that's in another company that does the same thing? Or do I want to like go in another avenue completely? And what would that avenue look like? And it's a gift to be able to be given the time to figure that out.
Absolutely. It's a gift or a curse, depending what you choose it to be in the end. But I totally agree. It's a gift.
That's the Esther Hicks thing. Like going back to Esther Hicks, it's all on the same stick, right? It's all the same stick. Are you gonna look at the positive side of the stick or the negative side of the stick? Like for me, it's a gift. Like, no, it feels terrible. Okay, on some level, it feels terrible. I want to acknowledge that. Like the human side, oh, it feels terrible, and right, and I want to not be there. On another level, it's like, oh, I'm being handed a moment, and what am I gonna do with this moment?
I think it goes back also to what we talked earlier about change, because even though I believe that we all to a certain degree want change in our lives because it's part of life, it's growth, it's, if we don't change, it will be the same, except for one thing: change will always happen. I think Einstein said that the only constant in life is change. And it's really about we don't have, like, if we get fired, for example, in that moment, we don't have the power over making a choice if we want to change, but we feel sometimes forced, like, I have to change now. I have to look for something new. I have to get more clarity now, compared to, you know what, next year, I'm going to quit my job. And then I'm going to, that's your own choice. So you do it on your own terms. But if you get fired, it's like, okay, in like some cases, don't come in tomorrow.
Right.
In other cases, I mean, here in Germany, most of the time you have, unless you really mess up big time, you have at least 3 months before your last day. So if they fire you, you have 3 months notice, which is great, because that way you can still get used to, okay, how can I deal with what's going to happen in 3 months?
Right.
So, but it's really about that differentiation between me making a choice to change, or me feeling the outside is forcing me to change, even though I don't want to.
Right. And there are a lot of people who don't want to change.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who don't want to do the work. And I honestly have to say the work's not hard. I mean, the work is a challenge because you have to be inner reflective and blah, 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 right? Like it's called work for a reason. But it's really, when people are like, well, you just did the work, I'm like, I did, like, I didn't realize. And then you're like, that was it, that was all the work was. I was so worried about looking at this thing on the inside of me, and that's all it was. And I did hard work today. It doesn't feel like it's as hard, for me at least, when I step into the work, as some people like talk about what the work looks like. And I'm like, it's not that big a deal. You just like look at it, and just seeing it releases it. Like there's just, once you see it, the power of it just like, it just dissipates. It's like, I don't know, piece of tissue paper in water, right? It just crumbles apart.
I totally agree with that. It's for you to change, you basically can just sit there or lie there or take a bath, and you can do all the work.
Exactly.
You can make it in a, or you go hiking. I love going outside in nature and do the work there, because I'm like, I can connect to myself, I can connect to nature in such a deep level. But I think in our society very often, because it's so much noise and so much distraction, that like if I'm at home, I have my piano, I have my computer, I have my phone, I have my iPad, I have my TV. Like there's so many things that I could use, and just by watching or like looking at it, I'm like, oh, there is something I could do right now. So let's do that first, and then I come back. But
Right.
how many times do we really come back to then focus on ourselves and focus on self-development, self-improvement, self-love? And like you said, we don't have to do anything. There's nothing we need to do. It's all about being. It's about being in the moment, being with ourselves, and being present. And then just let it happen, whatever needs to happen for you to go through that process. Of course, sometimes tools like writing or some external activity might help and support that. But if you don't have the tools with you in that moment, or like, oh, I'd rather go for a walk, I'm like, good, great, you can combine that. It's like with
Yep.
meditation. A lot of people say, oh, I don't, meditation is not for me. I'm like, you like going for walks? Yeah, I can think great. Like you're meditating while you're walking, because you're taking anything in, you're in the present moment, you're connecting to yourself, to your environment. That's a form of meditation. Like,
Yep.
oh really? Like, yeah.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
it's just change of perspective. And so many times it's all about changing your perspective. And then so many things look different, because you're like, oh, I just looked at it from one side, but now looking from a different angle, I can see myself changing, and I can see that I have the power to do that.
Agreed. Martin, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So this is Martin Schondorfer,
Yes.
and he's risingtofreedom.com, and he helps people figure out who they are and what it is that makes them come alive. And that is fantastic. I love that.
Thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.